Welcome back, class. This is the True and Accurate History of Greece, Part 14. I'd like to apologize for the delay. As I mentioned last time, I've been pretty sick. In better news, we've actually gotten several more subscribers in the meantime, and I'd like to thank all of you who have subscribed. There are 16 students now from around the world, and I've been looking at the Insight statistics, and we have viewers from Norway, from Finland, the UK, even Greece. So it's good to know that you're brushing up on your own history. Now, when we left off, we were in the middle of a war with Japan and the Aztec, and it wasn't going terribly well. It was a bit of a stalemate at the time, but we're going to see the course of this war change pretty drastically in this session. Now, another thing I should mention is that we've gotten over 300 views on the first video, and also over 200 views on the previous couple, and that's really great. So I want to thank you for watching, and I hope that you'll continue to do so. Updates will be coming more frequently as soon as we can get my throat sorted out, which according to the doctors this time should be within the next few weeks. So we can see here Corinth is under pretty heavy assault from Montezuma, and that's bad news for them as they're fairly isolated. There's not really anyone around there to help them, especially since Knossos was fallen. Now, Corinth is doing its best to hold out, but it's very difficult to get reinforcements there, and it's extremely easy for Montezuma to bring in more reinforcements to take down the city. And around this time, 1914 to 1916, the Greek discovered new weaponry technologies that allowed them to be more effective in war, and to build units which they called infantry. Now, the war on the border between Kagoshima and Sparta continued to be fairly solid, but over in Corinth, the odds were mounting against the Greek. There was only one unit there who could help, and Montezuma's artillery was devastating. Eventually, in 1916, Alexander's aides, who, as we recall, took over the government, made the decision to pull all the troops out of Corinth, anticipating its imminent demise, which turned out to be a fairly prescient move, as in that exact same year Montezuma captured the city. This infuriated Alexander, but he had very little power to influence the events going on beyond his room, really. His companions had taken full control. Now, last time we were talking about the first Japanese-Hellenic conflict which took place in the 12th century, and I apologize for using the term Sino-Hellenic. That would imply that the war was with China, which of course it was not. So it's the Japanese-Hellenic conflict, and there was the issue with the bastard children of Japanese soldiers in the border towns. And I mentioned that Alexander and Nobunaga had a meeting about it, and they decided that to resolve the conflict, they would have a competition of wits, a competition of strategy between the two of them. And as it turned out, Nobunaga had been expecting this to take the form of a game of Go. But Alexander was not familiar with the game Go, and he had been expecting the competition to take the form of chess. So when they both showed up, the game pieces were custom made for this match. Nobunaga began playing using the rules of Go, and Alexander began playing using the rules of chess, and this was indicative of the deep difference between the two cultures. Here we can see Montezuma attempting to rip off the Greek again, and the Greek refusing. It was indicative of the fundamental differences between the two leaders. Even on such a simple thing as a competition of strategy, they both expected different formats, and at the same time they both expected their own culture's format to be the only manner of properly identifying a tactical superior. Now, both leaders, as we know, are quite arrogant, particularly Nobunaga, but Alexander was very arrogant as well. You may recall that he claimed to be a god, altering the course of history fundamentally. So they were playing this game using different rules, and the judges from each side, of course, on the Japanese side were expecting the rules of Go, and on the Greek side were expecting the rules of chess, and they were flabbergasted. They could not figure out what was going on. But the two players were playing against each other for about 10 turns before they finally figured out what was wrong and were alerted by the judges. And Nobunaga, enraged, flipped over the table, declared that whatever chess was bullshit, and left the negotiations. This led to a very short war between the two nations right on the border of Kagoshima and Sparta, which lasted for 2 hours before Nobunaga's aides and Alexander's companions convinced the two to make peace, and that Go and chess were not worth fighting a war over. The issue of the bastard children remained unresolved, and here we can see 1925 Nobunaga and Alexander forming a peace treaty once again. This was good news for Kagoshima, but bad news for the rest of the Hellenic League. The war continued apace with the city-states who had allied themselves with Greece, but Greece itself took the time to begin building up its troops once again, as they really wanted to retake Corinth and Knossos. That was something that had really pissed them off. So they're working on it. Japan has denounced its former ally Montezuma in their usual fickle manner. New technologies are being discovered which will help in the battle against Montezuma. But really, the Greek are at a huge disadvantage. The Aztec Empire is 3 times as large as they are, has more advanced technology and a larger army. Nobunaga attempting to be spiteful towards the Greek for their alliance with Warsaw. The companion simply told him to get over it. A little report showing how busy we are. We are more busy than Montezuma, but less busy than the overseas. Again, Montezuma trying to rip off the Greek. The companions attempted to negotiate a better deal, but he refused, so the war continued. On into the 1930s. Now this was a costly war for both sides, but even so, the leadership of the companions and the belief that Alexander was a god gave strength to the people and brought them joy. As they saw the war progress, they felt surely at any moment Alexander will rise from his bed and stride out onto the battlefield and lead his troops to a complete, crushing victory over Montezuma, as Athena and the other gods would have expected. And this led to the dawning of a new golden age. Unfortunately, there was still no sign of coal, which was a large detriment to the Greek people in their attempts at war, especially as much of the war was taking place on water. Fortunately, the coastal cities were well defended against the Aztec marauders. At this point, some of the city-states began severing their ties with Greece, believing that they had given up the war against Montezuma and were leaving them to rot on their own. Others still held strong. You can see here Almaty is teaming up with Cape Town to destroy that Aztec raider. Catherine asking again for open borders so that she can get a foothold on the continent. Alexander again refusing her, as he knows that even if he granted her open borders, she would not provide any help to him against Montezuma. You can see here Ragusa is fighting valiantly against their border with Montezuma, but even their their enthusiasm is flagging. Athens, still the strongest city in the empire. Now, as we continue through this war, I'm going to take a moment to talk about something else that affects us here in our timeline, and particularly those of us in Canada. I know I have many viewers who live in my home country as well, but also in other countries around the world, particularly the US. The CRTC has recently passed a regulation which requires ISPs, and there are only 3 big ISPs in Canada, to switch over to a usage-based billing system, which means that if you exceed the cap of your monthly package, you'll be charged a great deal extra. In addition, the bandwidth caps overall are being drastically lowered. This follows from Bell's complaints in 2009 that people being able to watch streaming videos on the internet was cutting into their cable profits and their HDTV profits. The CRTC obviously took this seriously, despite the fact that in the last fiscal year Bell's profits were up 84%, because they essentially have an illegal monopoly which the CRTC enforces. So all this to say, we're going to be seeing some big changes in how the internet works as of March 1st. Packages are going to have much lower bandwidth limits and much higher costs. And if you go over your bandwidth limits, you can expect to be charged heavily for it with punitive fees. Most ISPs already have bandwidth limits but don't really enforce them, and that's going to be changing. So be careful. I've included a link to some information about it in the video description. Please read it, learn about it, learn about how this is going to impact you. If you're not Canadian, please don't dismiss this. Canada has been traditionally a testing ground for new economic gouging techniques, particularly with relation to telecommunications. So if it works out well for the companies here, you will find it moving swiftly into other countries as well. In addition, this move is really bad news for companies such as Netflix, Steam even, and a lot of online gaming as well. Xbox Live, the PlayStation Network. This is going to cut into their profits as Canadian customers find themselves being billed extra every month when they try to play games online, or when they try to watch videos on YouTube, or in many cases upload videos to YouTube, which is going to be difficult for me once I have a 20 gigabits per month uploaded and downloaded cap. But I will do my best. These videos are around 600 to 800 megabytes each, and if I'm doing them several times a week, that's going to cause a problem, but I will do my best, as I said. So I want you to keep an eye on that. There's also a petition going on. I'm not particularly a proponent of internet petitions, as they historically are essentially useless, but I've included a link to it anyway if you should want to sign. It currently has about 140,000 signatories since the announcement was made on January 28th. Now back to the war. It's 1949. We've discovered the railroad. The companions trying to get through Japan to bring troops up to fallen Corinth, but at the exact moment when that was about to come to fruition, Montezuma sued for peace with a fair deal, which was so unusual that Alexander's companions took it upon themselves to accept that deal. Now this did not mean that the war was over, it simply meant that the fighting was done. As Greece moved into a new era, they also began hatching new schemes, building their army for their campaign, which would come up as soon as they had enough soldiers to retake Corinth, retake Knossos, and destroy Japan. The companions had not given up on Alexander's dream of global conquest, neither had he. Please remember to rate, comment on this video if you have any questions you'd like to ask or anything you'd like to suggest to me. And if you could subscribe to this course, I would greatly appreciate it, and it will give you better access to the lessons. Until next time, all the best.